What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Jeremy Kersten Show. In today's episode, we interview author and motivational speaker Ari Gunzburg. We talk about his tragedy as a little boy and how he kind of dealt with that as a teenager. We also talk about his new book that he came out with this year called The Little Book of Greatness, where he goes through and discusses the 5 keys to greatness through a fictional story. Stick around. I think you're going to enjoy it. It's a pretty good interview. It shares a lot of insightful stuff. Pretty much in this, the first half is going to be his story and kind of upbringing and all that good stuff. And then the second half is talking about his book. So check it out. Let me know if you make it till the end. I hope you do. Stay tuned. Before we get into the interview, please make sure you subscribe if you haven't already. Hit that thumbs up so we can help make sure that this video gets out to more people. And if you haven't already, turn on the notifications by hitting that notification bell. Now let's get into the interview. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we've got a very special guest with us today. His name is Ari Gunzburg. I'm going to read his bio here. It says, Ari Gunzburg is the rising star in personal growth after experiencing trauma as a child and then extreme volatility as a teenager. As an award-winning international speaker, Ari motivates people using personal stories filled with triumph, tragedy, and transformation. Ari has also helped inspire people using one-on-one coaching in his books for both children and adults. New in 2020 in his debut nonfiction title, The Little Book of Greatness. Ari, thank you so much for coming on the Jeremy Kersten Show.
I appreciate it, Jeremy. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm excited, man. I think there's a lot to unpack here and a lot to talk about. I don't even know if I'm going to get to all the points today, but
that's awesome, man. You know what? I don't. I was going to make a joke, but I'm canceling all therapy for the week if we got this unpacking. No, but I don't have any therapy for the week. That's why I was like about to make it. And I was like, how am I going to cancel something I don't have? Sorry. But yeah, man, let's unpack it. Let's make make that happen.
Yeah. So I just finished your book,
amazing.
Little Book of Greatness. It's fantastic. It's for those who don't know, the subtitle there is A Parable About Unlocking Your Destiny. So it's a fictional story about a man named David who meets a couple series of characters who help him unlock the 5 keys to greatness. Now, we'll talk about that a little bit. Also kind of want to talk about, the traumatic experience that you experienced as a child and kind of how that shaped. So again, lots of different things to talk about. So heck, I guess let's kind of back up. Let's go ahead and start at that traumatic experience because, I read a short little piece of that of kind of like, what that was. But yeah, for those who don't know, I guess let's kind of start there.
Sure. Okay, so when I was a kid, I'm sorry, I'm hedging because I'm like trying to figure out, okay, where do I start in order to like go ahead and do this? Because for better or for worse, I mean, it's one of these things that it happened, and there were so many different areas to like what went on that sometimes I can just go on and on and on about it. So I don't want to like take up the whole hour or however long we're recording for or whatever. But basically, when I was 10 years old, we went on a field trip. So this is back in the 90s. So there's, like nowadays they'd have like 15 chaperones for every 3 kids, but back then it was like, whatever, just go. So we, and then another example of the times was we had 17 kids in the class and a rabbi, which is, just basically a teacher. And we all crammed into a 12 or 15 passenger van because who cared, right? It was the 90s, big deal, double buckle, no problem. So we go to this field trip. We have a baseball game, and then the rabbi's like, let's go hiking in the woods. And he loved hiking in the woods. I mean, this is like his thing. Like he would take his kids out all the time to go hiking. It was a chance to kind of experience God's world. And then to, when you're dealing with younger kids or your own kids or your students or whoever, it's a chance also to sit there and say, listen, you're living in an amazing world. And I understand people come from different backgrounds, but from his background, it was, you're living in an amazing world. These are the trees. God created this, and this works together with this. And, you know, this is a part of the ecosystem. And if this wasn't there, none of this stuff would work. I mean, you know, just a tiny, tiny little example, right? When a tree falls in the forest, you know, immediately, or you know, I don't know, if very, very quickly, the fungus and the mold and the bugs and everything starts kind of like eating away at that tree, and eventually it becomes new soil for the other trees that are growing. But if you took out part of those ingredients, well, trees would fall in the forest, and nothing would happen to them. They wouldn't decompose. I mean, I think out west they call it the petrified forest or something, where they just never decompose. But if that happens in a living, breathing forest, like it would just be fallen trees everywhere. That you wouldn't be able to walk anywhere. They wouldn't be able to do anything. So there's so much stuff that's going on that all works in you know, in coordination to create this world that we live in. So we start going for this hike. Now, the day before this field trip, our rabbi was late to school because he went to the doctor. You know, he's got to go to the doctor, and he went to the doctor. The doctor did like the whole physical and everything else, and he gave him a clean bill of health. You're fine. No, nothing. No, you're all good. So he comes to school, and we go on this field trip, and we play baseball, and now we're hiking in the woods, and it's a typical Baltimore muggy summer, or like pre-summer and everything, May, June time, and it's hot. And so we're all like listening to him, and it's like we're little kids, you know, we're 10 years old, 11 years old. So finally, like after a little while, like we start to you know, some of us start to run ahead on the trail. And again, right back in the 90s, it wasn't like I have to see you every single second. It was more like, no problem, you know, just don't go too far ahead. Okay. So so a bunch of us ended up finding a stream up ahead, and so we're playing in the stream, waiting for everybody else to catch up. And you know, so there was like a hill going back into the trail, and then you couldn't see the trail anymore. So all of a sudden, a few kids like surface on this hill, looking down at the stream where we're sitting, and they start screaming out to us, you know, guys, something's wrong. Rebbe's hurt. And we're like, what? So at first we completely ignore them. We're 11 years old. Our rabbi's not hurt. There's absolutely zero chance of that happening. So don't worry about it. And we completely ignore them. Cause like there was always like jokes and
Was he?
pranks.
I mean,
Go
was he
ahead.
a relatively healthy, you know, guy, young?
Yeah. He wasn't like morbidly obese. You know, he was 50 years old.
Mm.
Uh, and again, right, he had just been to the doctor, who I presume, you know, blood work, and I don't know if he had gotten the blood work results, but like, you know, checked his blood pressure, checked his this, checked his this, checked his this, and he's like, okay, you're healthy, go ahead, go back to what you're doing. Um, anyways, so they're calling out to us, he's hurt, and finally we're like, okay, maybe there's something going on here. So we ran back with them, and like we're sitting there, and like, you know, he's like laying out, the rabbi's like laying out prone. Oh, just to, yeah. So he's laying out prone on the leaves and everything. Just that's it. Fell over. And people have asked before, like, did something happen in the woods? And other than potentially the heat, like it was like, no, he just passed away, like, you know, while he was walking, basically. Um, I messed up that part of the story, man. Rewind. No, whatever. So he's laying down there. We don't really know what's going on, you know, and we're like, okay, it's time to go for help. So a few of us went one direction, a bunch of other kids went another direction. We had a little shouting match about which was the right way to go, because you know, we didn't necessarily know. So so we're kind of like wandering and trying to find our way out of the woods. And like I remember, like I was with the group of three, and I remember like we were like sitting there and arguing, like we need to get out of the woods, we need to go get help. But on the other hand, like there was this balance of, yeah, but maybe it was like the heat or something about the heat that made him pass away. Like we need to also like take care of ourselves, because if we just run fully, you know, at breakneck speed out of the forest, like what if something happens to us on our way out? So we were like, go, 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 go. Okay, we got to stop and take a break. It's so hot. Like we'll take a break. And then we're like, go, 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 go. Um, and there was also like some concern about whether or not we were going the right way to get out of the forest.
Mm.
Um,
So it's about, I don't know, 8 to 10 10-year-olds all by themselves.
well, no, in our group it was three of us.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
No, it's all good. There was seven. There were seven kids, I think, who went off in a different direction, and seven kids stayed behind with the rabbi.
Okay.
Um, so we're like wandering around through the forest. We didn't really know where we're going. I mean, a couple of the kids kind of really knew pretty well. And so it was this really, really eerie thing. um, while we're trying to find our way out, we all of a sudden like start hearing this music and stuff. And I remember at the time, I think thinking that it was a carnival. I don't know if that was like something we discussed or something that I just thought in my head, but it was kind of like, we hear this music. It sounds like it might be a carnival. We should go to the music because whatever is there by the music, there are people, because trees don't make music, at least not music that we can hear. um, and we ended up following the music, and we get out of the forest, and there's a man standing wearing a kilt playing the bagpipes, and all of a sudden we're like, okay, what? But like we saw buildings like off in the distance, so we like ran to the building. Like clearly we didn't ask the guy in the kilt for help. I have no idea what he was doing. I mean, maybe that's just where he practiced. Maybe he just decided to go there that day. I mean, I think I believe in my heart that like whatever the case was, like God sat there and put like a thought in his head, like, nope, that's where you need to be practicing today, whether he did it every day or not. But we saw the buildings off in the distance. We ran, we grabbed a couple of guys. Turned out um, later on, we figured out that, or at least I figured out, I think, that these were outward bound instructors. So, so at this point, and it took me many years to connect this, but at this point, I'm also an outward bound alumnus, some years after that. But anyways, we grab a couple of the guys, they come back with us. One of them starts doing CPR immediately. The other one grabs all 10, not grabs, but I'm saying leads all 10 of us. He says, come on, let's go. And he brings us back to the house, or 9 of us. The 3 of us split up when we got to the buildings. One kid stayed behind. He's like, if the other kids show up out of the woods, somebody needs to be here to tell them, stay put, don't go back into the woods. So he stayed behind, and 2 of us led the Rangers or whatever they were back into the woods. 9 of us went back. We found the other 7 kids ended up out of the forest as well. And so the school came, and they had their hushed discussions off in the distance with not telling us anything. And there was like another vivid scene that I also have like very, very starkly etched in my memory, is that there was like this really, really large tree. And I mean, we imagine we're all 10, 11 years old. We have no idea what's going on, right? This is supposed to be like a happy day. We're supposed to be on our field trip, and catastrophe struck, and we don't know what the outcome of this was. And we're sitting there, and we're like, what's going on? Is he okay? Is he alive? Is he breathing? Like, what happened with the CPR? What happened with it? No clue. And we're standing around this like really, really large tree, kind of just like milling about, like totally shell shocked, talking a little bit maybe, like, and nobody's saying a word to us. And finally, they kind of, I guess, nominated our teacher from the year before, rabbi from the year before. It was his van. They're like, okay, take your van, take them home. So we just drove around one by one, and like we don't live in the same area or anything, so like drove around and like for a long time just dropping each one of us off at home. Um, it was weird also because like my dad, it wasn't like they like sent a message. I mean, also the communication wasn't happening at light speed like it happens
Right.
nowadays. It's not like you sit there and drop a WhatsApp message into a group or send a mass text or an email even. Like there was really nothing. So my dad, he called into the school, and like that was also like just this surreal moment. Like he's sitting there like in the kitchen with the phone to his head. Like he picked up the phone. He's like, hey, yeah, no, Dr. Frank Gunzburg, whatever. My son, he came home early from the thing today. Like, I'm just wondering what happened. And like, everything just dropped and fell, and like, he kind of like, just like puts I see, and he like puts the phone down, and he like looks up, and he's like, he's gone. And like, it was just like, it was like a ton of bricks. I mean, like I started bawling. I mean, he knew him also. He started bawling. I'm saying, like, we were just sitting there hugging and crying for like 45 minutes. And I mean, it was just a really long time. It was just like devastating. And like, yeah, it was really difficult. I mean, the funeral was the next day. Like they let the kids go to the funeral part of it, but they didn't let them go to the burial part of it. And every religion has different customs for funerals, last
Mm.
rites, burials, etc. And the burial is a big part of it within Judaism and stuff. And so I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying that was the wrong choice to not let a bunch of 10-year-olds go to the dirt, go to the burial point. You know, I
Yeah,
don't really
it was
know.
just really heavy.
Heavy, yeah. I think heavy is the word to say.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm, you
yeah, I mean
know,
that's that. Now before it was really really heavy, and it's been something I've been dealing with for my entire life, and it um maybe I there's ways to say maybe I've gotten a little bit better with dealing with it, maybe not, but certainly there has been healing that has happened over the years. But I just wanted to bring up one really really key point, like one really key point of healing that happened about 6 years ago or so. So that's when I had, and I'm saying you have to realize I'm like 10 years old.
mhm.
Maybe I was 11 actually, whatever. I'm saying at fourth grade, I was 10, 11. And, so like I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, when I have a son, I'm naming my son after this guy, right? When I'm 10, 11 years old, I'm sitting there and saying this. When I have a son, I'm naming my son after this guy. So 6 years ago, I had my first son. And, like there's different customs, like who gets to name, blah, 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 this, that. And like, I don't remember if it was before we got married, right after we got married or something, but I was kind of like, yeah, no, I don't think you realize, like, the first boy that we have, that's what his name's going to be. Yeah, but no. I don't think you realize, like, this has been the past, like, whatever, like 15, 20 years, like, that's what the name is going to be. Like, and I mean, so there was a name that she was adamant putting on it. It means joy and happiness. So, I wasn't opposed to adding a name. I was just like, this child needs to be named after this man. So we ended up naming. So 6 years ago, we named our first son after, not our first child, our first son, after this man, and added one name that means joy and happiness. And so there's that circle that we come back to this moment, and it was like it was like strange, not strange.
Kind of
So we're
bittersweet.
at it was yeah it was we're at the naming and stuff, and like my little brother's like, oh, I knew it. My mom's sitting there like off to the side, like when I finished with all the stuff that was going on, like in the center, she's like, I go over to her and stuff, and she's like crying, and like I'm like, and she's like, I kind of had a feeling. And my dad, my dad was holding him when he got named and stuff, and like it was just like bittersweet, emotional, just like supercharged and everything, and like it was just it was pretty intense.
Well, thank you for sharing that story. Um,
Yeah,
kind of brave to just be transparent like that. I'm sorry for your loss. Um,
thank you.
I understand, that had a big, I guess, obviously it had a big impact on your life. So, from what I understand, the following years as a teenager were, kind of troublesome and run-ins with police and things like that. Um, I mean, I guess like what I want to get at is like how did that event shake you, and what about it led you kind of astray and kind of ambivalent about your current situation in your life? Like, what do you think about it kind of took you off into this area of darkness?
Sorry. Um, I have my phone on Do Not Disturb, but my wife's calls come through the Do Not Disturb, so I apologize. Sorry. What was the question again?
Like, what about that event think or do you think kind of took you off into this area of darkness? Kind of, because
Ah, okay.
I mean,
Um, I mean, if you look at the literature, which I didn't really learn about this until much later. I would imagine, and this is like all self-diagnosis, not diagnosis, because like whatever, but I would imagine that I either still do or used to suffer from PTSD from that moment. I certainly had a level of resilience from it. I actually, in college, when I took Psychology 101 and we had to do a whole paper, I actually did the paper on resilience, and I don't think it was like a research project, like I don't think I had to be a test subject, but I certainly like looked into resilience because of like all the stuff that had happened and the way that I dealt with it, etc. Um, as with most things in life, if you look at it in with a larger lens, um, you'll see that it's there, not necessarily one moment in time that you can usually point to and say that's why it happened. It's the, I would say that this was the first straw that started to break the camel's back, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I mean, it was just, so there was that problem. And then in fifth grade, they gave us, this was fourth grade. In fifth grade, they gave us a brand new teacher who had never taught before. So like there was like a whole learning period. And then in sixth grade, they left me back for Judaic studies, and not for general studies. General studies, I was always a straight A student. But for the Judaic stuff, they left me back, so I had to go repeat part of it. And then I went back into sixth grade, and it was still a new teacher. Like, I don't know why they gave us all these new teachers. And then in seventh grade, we had a huge problem with our English teacher, and it was a nightmare. And then I ended up leaving that school, and I ended up going to another school, and making friends with some kids I knew from way back when I was much, much younger, and hanging out with other people. And a lot of us were struggling with different things. And so some of it, as you can imagine, right, groups of friends start doing things that they're not necessarily supposed to be doing. And they all, a lot of times, do it together, maybe not on that same day, but they kind of drift together, right? You are the company of the five. You are the average of the five people you spend the most time with, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
You are the company you keep. So together, we were kind of like all leading ourselves down like the wrong path and stuff. And so, um, like you had mentioned, like my run-ins with the police and stuff. And so like a lot of those moments were like, well, if I only had been hanging out with like the kids who are doing a little bit better and not the kids who are doing a little bit worse, like that wouldn't have
Mm-hmm.
happened, like maybe
So,
the whole episode would have still happened, but I wouldn't have been there.
so what
Um,
woke you up? What made you say, this ain't working for me. I need to look further.
um, so again, there were a lot of small separate incidents that woke me up to certain separate things. Certainly run-ins with the police, like after it had happened 3 or 4 times, I was like, I really don't want to have anything to do with that ever again. you know so there was a level of like, I'm gonna like do everything I can to make sure that I'm not in, or after, probably a more accurate way of saying that probably is that after the second or third time, because two happened right in close connection with each other. um and then one happened like a year and a half, 2 years later, and that was kind of like just an act. Like, I don't think that whatever, without getting too deeply into it, um potentially maybe the police broke the law in coming into the house where they shouldn't have come into. But once they came into, they were, they claimed probable cause, but I don't know if there was actually probable cause, or they
Yeah.
actually opened up the door. I don't really know
I,
what happened or anything.
I actually have a
um
similar story, so it's kind of funny. Like I'm just shaking my head, like I completely
oh yeah. Right.
understand.
Whatever, I don't know about that one. But certainly, like, that was like another thing of like, okay, yeah, I don't want to be in a situation like that again. And then a few years later, um I really honestly believe that it was done only to save me, in the sense that I'm not sure exactly what happened. I went to a bar with some friends of mine, including my girlfriend at the time, and I don't know like what happened exactly. Somebody put something in my drink or something. I have no idea. But the next thing I know, like, I was in the whatever. I was like in the hospital. I'm saying, like, basically the police found me like screaming deliriously and like pouring blood from the back of my head, and they're like, we need to get medical attention for you right now. And I'm like, I'm not going anywhere. And like, I was in DC and I thought I was in Baltimore again. And I was like, whatever. So they took me into a hospital to get medical attention. And that was basically the crux of that whole thing and everything. I mean, like, I was, um, yeah, I'm trying to think of like what I could and couldn't say on that whole thing. It was like a really weird episode, because they were just trying to get me help, and so I'm still like not okay. Somebody put something in my drink, hit me on the back of the head. I don't even know what happened.
Yeah.
Um, and then I was struggling, and suppose that whole thing's over with. So probably I can say it, but like, I don't know. I don't even necessarily know, but supposedly, allegedly, I like need one of the cops. I don't know if it was so hard or anything, right? But they slapped a what do you call it on it, and I'm like, okay, great. But they ended up dropping the charges, or there was a null pros or whatever. Like, I don't remember exactly what happened. You know, right. They always say, like, you know, anything you say can and will be used. Right. So like when I went to the police station, like, after the court let me out on my own recon, like, they're like, what was it? Oh, I was like, guys, listen, to the guy who, like, this whole thing happened to, like, because I don't even, I know, so the guy that this whole thing happened to, I was like, please let him know for anything that allegedly happened. Like, I'm really, really sorry. It was an act, like, it wasn't supposed to happen and stuff. And so, like, um, that ended up being like nothing, but like, you know, I don't know, you get into those situations, you don't want to, it's not like a pleasant place to be.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to be there anymore. That's one wake up. Uh, and then also, like, we, you know, we go through life, and like what makes sense and what's appropriate for what we're doing at the time. You know, we're in stages. You know, we're always in these phases and in these stages. And, you know, um, like, for instance, you know, I used to have a friend, like, we would, like, you know, we're working at this pizza shop or whatever, and we, oh, let's go hang out tonight. We'll basically, there's nothing else going on, so let's, you know, get a couple beers and we'll watch TV, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, maybe I could do that once in a while right now, but that's not appropriate for the stage of life that I'm in now. But right then, I don't think that was, you know, that wasn't necessarily a problem. We go, we get a six pack, we drink a six pack together, and like, that would be it. You know, so like, we always have these stages in our life, but sometimes it's hard recognizing when that phase is over, when that stage is over, or sometimes being too nostalgic for that stage and wanting to go back to it. And I think that's maybe what sometimes gets a lot of us back into trouble. Um, but
Yeah.
yeah, you know, so as much as possible, if you can recognize when those phases of your life are moving on to the next phase, because there's so much that happens in life, and there's so many great things that we go through, and great things that we experience. Um, you know, and like I tell my kids now, you know, they're like, oh, I want to be so old. I want to be like 15 already, because then you'll let me do all this stuff. I'm like, listen, you know, you're 6 now, you're 9 now, whatever age you are now, like, when you turn 10, when you will never be 9 again. And the stuff that you can do when you're 9, and the way that you view the world when you're 9, and the way that things are for you when you're 9 will never be the same again for you ever in your entire life. And if you try to skip ahead, which I think I did, I personally think that I did a little bit of my life when I was younger, if you try to skip ahead and be 13, you're going to miss out on 4 years of your life, 4 years that you could have such crazy, amazing things happening with you.
Yeah.
Um, you know, and this came up a while ago, where like there was like a party or something, and I saw a guy that I'm friends with, and I go over to him, and I'm like, you know, he was like, he wasn't like into the party and stuff, you know, and so I like went up to him, and I'm like, how old are you? And he's like, I'm 34. You know, it was a few years ago. He's like, I'm 34. I'm like, okay, do you realize that you will never in your life be 34 at this event again? It's a yearly event, you know, you will never be 34 at this event again. Right? You know, like, let's say a holiday party, Christmas party, Hanukkah party, Thanksgiving, Halloween, whatever it is, you
Mm-hmm.
will never, ever be whatever age you are right now again in that moment. And if you don't sit there and fully take advantage of the fact that you can experience it at 28, at 42, at 55, whatever the age is, you know, we lose out. And that's, you read the book. So, you know, that's a big part of what the third key is all about: being engaged, being
Exactly.
present
Yeah.
when these things are happening with us.
Well, that's a good segue to kind of get into the book. I mean, if it's all right with you, I mean, I didn't want to spill the beans too much. You know, so I didn't.
Yeah.
How
If you
deep you wanted to get
don't know,
into?
you can I would say that the five keys are open season, and the story itself, you can discuss the earlier parts but not the others. But at the
Sure.
end of the day, listen, something I've had to come to terms with are two things. First of all, you can't control stuff like that. Like, for instance, people like wanting to write like a really good review sat there and just laid the whole thing out there in the reviews,
Yeah.
and it's
Like
like,
almost
yeah,
like
you know,
rewrote it.
yeah, like, you know, like, thanks for giving away the everything, you know. But that's one thing. And the other thing is that you also can't control, like, with with people, you know, people are going to pirate stuff. It's just going to happen. I don't know. There's not, I saw like, it's a sketchy looking website, and for all I know, it's a virus. Please don't go on there. Like if you really desperately, I don't know, need the book and you can't afford it or something, I don't know, whatever. But, reach out to me. Don't like put a virus on your computer or something. Like, we could probably work something out. That's not the point. The book's not so expensive to begin with, but, you can't control that type of stuff. But the 5 keys to greatness is a concept. I haven't fully had the chance to finish setting up the website yet, but I plan on giving that away. Like, gratis. If you just want to learn what the 5 keys to greatness are, here it is. Enjoy. But the ability to sit down and spend time with the book and interact with the 5 keys like that, that's within the book. I think that's fair.
Yeah. Man, I don't know which way I want to get, like which approach I want to talk about the book first. The fact that you wrote
We
it.
can break down the 5 keys if you want first, and then I don't know what
Yeah.
other approaches you had.
Well, I guess first I was going to say, like, why did you choose to go about it in a fictional way as opposed to just a traditional self-help book or something?
Um, okay, great question.
Just for more
I
fun, entertainment?
I love fiction, and some nonfiction I really, really, really enjoy. Most nonfiction, I don't end up finishing the book.
Hmm.
That's just meaning if I pick up a Malcolm Gladwell, I'm finishing that book because his writing is really good. It's concise. He tells a great story, and you want to know like what's the next step, right? But there's a lot of nonfiction where you're like, this is really good information, but I really wish that you had told it to me in a much slimmer volume so I could just get it.
Yeah.
Um, but books that I've read that are told in a story form, you can still get a lot of information and a lot of inspiration from it, but it's much easier to sit down with that book, read through it, and then read through it all the way till the very end.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like where I was coming from. Like I have another book that I'm working on for another program of mine that integrates the 5 keys to greatness, and the outline that I have is like the first third of the book is going to be just kind of like the same idea, like a story that kind of gives over the general gist of it. The second third is going to be also it's going to be also very, very story based, but more autobiographical. Telling the stories from my own life that helped bring this to fruition and why, like, I think it makes sense. And then the third part I think is actually telling over the idea. So again, right, I have trouble finishing nonfiction books a lot of times, and so I feel like maybe I wouldn't have such trouble if they cut their books down. I don't know.
Yeah.
There are nonfiction books that are really interesting and I've finished no problem. Listening, certainly I have an easier time finishing because if I have like a long road trip coming up, I'll sit there and get a book and I'll listen to it there and back or whatever.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah.
Well, I mean, for anyone who hasn't read it or wondering kind of what its, I guess its suitability, is it's in my opinion, it's appropriate for all ages. I'm probably going to ask my daughter who's 13 to read it. Uh,
Okay.
so because I think it's got really good lessons, and so I guess we'll kind of start off with it, right? So the 5 keys to greatness is easy to remember by an acronym, and that's great. And so each letter is going to, stand for a different one of those traits. And the first one is give. The second is reason. The third is engage. The fourth is amazing. And the fifth is tenacity. I like how you started off with give because it kind of sets up the mind frame that this is all done in a non-selfish manner, that our pursuit of bettering ourselves and building upon our lives and creating more value is not about us. It's about giving and serving to others. So I like how you kind of started off with, showing that that's kind of the mindset. But I want to hear more kind of on what you think and what you have to offer about giving and how that kind of builds upon our life.
Okay. So first of all, I just wanted to go back on your last point about your daughter. That's awesome. Please, by all means. I mean, that would be really amazing. And if she enjoys it, I'd love to hear about that from you. Thank you. My teacher, one of my former teachers, I sent him the book or I sent him a link or I forgot exactly. And so he told me, he's like, yeah, no, I read through the book. And then my grandchildren, I think 13 or 11 or 13, 15, something like that, he's like, they both read through the book and they also really enjoyed it. So I do know that I've seen younger teenagers read through the book and enjoy it. If I ever have the time, I would love to put together a version of the 5 Keys to Greatness that's really geared more towards teens,
Sure.
because the information here is good and it's applicable to teens, but I feel like if I'm talking directly to them, they'll be able to connect with it more.
Mm-hmm.
And like we were just talking about, coming from a place where I went through a lot of volatility in my teenage years, hopefully it'll help. So giving is, I you know there's a lot of problems in the world that we have nowadays, or even if you don't want to call them problems, there's a lot of things going on in the world nowadays that if we just had a little bit more of a giving attitude, would either go away completely or they would be reduced drastically. And
Like
I
what,
don't
for
want
example?
to, like what, for example? Um, like let's just take this pandemic for example. There are a lot of people out there who are making sure to give, not taking away from that, but like there were videos coming out early on of people who were like hoarding, let's say, toilet paper or hoarding all these supplies and stuff, and just focused on what was best for them.
Mm-hmm.
But like if you're only focused on, there was a video that I saw, like, if it's all about me and not about we, we're not going to make it through. The only way we make through it is if it's about we, right? We have to be focused on, we have to give, right? I mean, those types of problems, if people had been like, well, yeah, no, I got the last toilet paper, and they see somebody else needs toilet paper, be like, look, I just got this 30 pack, why don't I give you half of it, or why don't I give you like 6 rolls or something, so you're not like, you don't have, you don't have a big problem. um, and people were panicking, and people were panicking because very very quickly people over I lost the word. People put too much pressure on the supply chain. I actually wrote an article about this on LinkedIn. People put too much pressure on the supply chain. They weren't giving it a chance to replenish. And then, like, as soon as they would replenish a little bit, they would go and buy it out. And so everybody's like, oh no, there's a toilet paper shortage. And it's like, no, there is no toilet paper shortage. What's going on is that, I saw, first of all, that a lot of the toilet paper that usually gets manufactured is getting manufactured for businesses, and nobody's going into businesses anymore. So now all the toilet paper that we need is toilet paper for the home. We don't have those levels necessarily. Also, right, when everybody overbuys, the supply chain is good for, let's say, a week or 2 weeks or whatever. When everybody overbuys because they're like panicking, then you overwhelm the supply chain and you can't do anything about it. So if we're more focused on giving, and part of the point is that it's not giving money, it's not giving food, it's giving whatever it is that you can give. It's taking a minute. Earlier today, I was by a gas station, and there was a gentleman, an elderly gentleman, who I could see was having trouble opening up his gas tank. And it's very hard, especially now. We're in November 2020. It's the middle of the COVID pandemic. You never know where somebody stands with like getting too close to them.
Mm-hmm.
I could see he was having trouble, and I wanted to like help him. Like, he needed to put gas in his car. So I said, do you want a hand? Like I've got a knife. Maybe we need to pry it open. It had like a lock on it. So he's like, sure. So I go over, and like, he's like, yeah, no, they just fixed it, but it's not working. So he gave me his keys to try for a second, and we were trying to go through different things. And finally, like, we tried a different key, and it popped right open. And so I went through, I was like, well, it's not this key, it's not this key, but it's this key. He said, okay, fine. So he knows what to do for the next time. But so what does that take for me, right? Almost nothing. I mean, it took what, 2 minutes? 2 minutes. Here you have a guy, he's having trouble, right? Maybe he hasn't talked. I mean, for all I know, because of the pandemic, maybe he hasn't talked to somebody in 3 weeks,
Yeah.
you know? Um, but I don't, so I was able to help him in a tiny, tiny little bit. And it didn't really take much for me, but like, if everybody was doing stuff like that all the time, it would really, really have a overwhelming impact on what the world is like. Funny pandemic story about helping people. I was in the post office last week or so, and I'm on my way out, and a lady drops her keys. Now, I come from a place where somebody drops their keys, you reach down, you pick them up for them. Of course, now in the middle of the pandemic, you don't really necessarily do that, even if you can see that they're struggling to pick up their keys without permission, because nobody wants you touching their stuff because of your germs. So I like, by instinct, I start going to pick up the keys, and I'm like, wait, do you want me to pick them up? And she's like, I got it. I'm like, all right. I'm like, it's different times, in the olden days, it would have been fine, in the olden
Yeah.
days. Oh man, in the olden days. But nowadays, so I was like, but that's like one of those, so it's there, you want to give to people, but you also want to be sensitive to, you don't want to make somebody uncomfortable because, I have to give and they make them uncomfortable,
Hmm.
yeah, we could certainly, they talk about a smile a lot of times, you smile and it spreads to the next person who smiles, spreads to the next person. Giving also is like that, it's contagious also. The more that each one of us gives, the better we feel about ourselves, and then we'll be more likely to give the next time. And the person we gave to, maybe we'll pay it forward a little bit, and then they'll pay it forward a little bit. And I mean, could you imagine a world where instead of people cutting each other off to get in line, they're like both converging on the checkout counter at the supermarket, and they're like, yeah, why don't you go first? It's all good, no big deal. You go first. Oh, okay. Like, I mean, one of the things, my brother moved to Richmond, and one of the things that he loves about Richmond, coming from Baltimore, and it's even more noticeable if you live in New York for a little while, is that in Richmond, right, you'll be like walking and they'll stop. Yeah, go ahead, don't worry. Or you'll be driving and you'll be at the stop sign and maybe you were the second one there and they'll be like, yeah, go ahead, don't worry.
People
Like,
just a lot calmer and
yeah, it's like, just who cares.
Yeah,
Um, so that's just, I don't know, it could help elevate all of us in the whole world, really.
for sure. I guess we'll go on to the second one, and that's reason. And reason is all about defining a purpose. And what I am, I guess what I liked about that chapter and that part of it is whenever it was being explained, you quickly kind of stated and shared that it doesn't need to be solid and concrete, and it's not set in stone. You could sit here and come up with good purpose and reason, and next week, you kind of decide, you know what, this isn't exactly what I value and what's important to me, and you can shift and pivot, and that's fine. So, I guess talk a little bit about kind of reason and how we can set that up for ourselves, especially during a time right now, because like you had mentioned, we're in the pandemic. A lot of people are without jobs. A lot of people are sitting at home. They're trying to wonder what to do next. Their self worth is deflated. They need reason right now to feel better.
Yeah. So as far as the pandemic goes, remember that hope is kind of an end all be all. It's all important, and holding on to hope is it's like a real ticket to making it through something like this. But having a reason is, it's really hard to align your life around nothing, you know and that's why having a stated reason is so important. And then also, sometimes people will have like a very specific purpose to live their life by, but they don't bring that into their work, or they'll figure out something for their work, but they won't bring it into their home life. And that's why I kind of said, listen, you can define whatever major area of life that you want, and define a reason for that specifically. Have one for work because you spend a third of your time there. Have one for home because you spend a third of your time there, or whatever the numbers are. um, if you're, let's say, a bodybuilder who spends 5 hours a day working on their muscles in addition to work and in addition to home, then maybe have a stated purpose for that also. And that's just one example, but the point is if you have something where you're spending a large chunk of your time, make a reason for, define a reason for it. And yeah, I mean, I feel like a lot of people have like what we call in gaming, and I think I've heard it in other contexts also. In gaming, we call it AP, right? Analysis paralysis. They're so concerned about getting the exact perfect right reason. This happens to me all the time, not for reason, but for other stuff. So
Mhm.
concerned with having the exact right thing that they never take action. And action is what moves the world forward. I mean, we nothing happens if we don't take action on it, right? We can have the best idea in the world, but if we don't sit there and like take concrete action towards fulfilling that idea, like nothing's going to happen. So you know that's why I advocate for create a reason, and if you need to change it next week, that's fine. you might have a problem if you're changing it every week. You might need like Reasons Anonymous or something. But don't feel married to that reason, and feel free to be fluid and dynamic, because you're a human person. You change. I mean, who we are now is not the same as who we were 10 years ago, and it's not going to be the same as who we will be in 10 years from now. So
Mhm.
to adjust our reasoning behind the things that we do is fine. And if you want to record, if it's been something you've been living your life aligned with for 5 years, you want to record it for posterity and then pick another one, no problem. I mean, write a few journal entries talking about how this was what you were aligned with, and now you want to align with something else.
Yeah, definitely. Um, Man, see, and so now you bring up journaling, and I'm thinking I probably don't even have time to get to that one today, but so we're probably
Yeah,
gonna have
I
to.
have I have something in 10 more minutes.
I'm sorry.
I have a
Oh,
thing in like 10 minutes.
okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah.
no
So
worries.
we'll try to move quick. It actually, because I have so much more, we'll just try to wrap up the next three real quick. Engage, amazing, and tenacity. Let's talk about those real quick.
I'll try and do a real brief summary on them. So engage is basically being more present in the present moment, being more engaged with your life. Uh, Especially nowadays with the advent of smartphones, we are incredibly disengaged, incredibly disconnected from our life. And so it's kind of just asking people to bring more of an awareness, to be a little bit more present, to be a little bit more engaged, to put the smartphone away, to really interact with the people around us and not with the things around us. And it's something we can work on for our entire life. Don't think just because you did really well today that you're done, and don't think that just because you did really poorly yesterday or the tomorrow that you're done, that you can never do it. It's something we will all struggle with for all our lives, unless you decide to sit there. Well, not even if you decide to get rid of the smartphone, you're still going to struggle with it. Amazing is all about maintaining a positive mindset. There's myriads of ways to do this, of information about this, most of it not my own, but maintaining a positive mindset is life changing. The more that you can look at things that happen to you and try and find the good in it. And we were talking before about something that happened to me when I was a kid. It was very difficult, and you know I don't necessarily know why it happened, but I can look at it in a positive manner and recognize that it was something that helped me grow. I mean, the things we were talking also before with run-ins with police and everything. I mean, I don't wish that had happened, but now that it did, I mean, what did I learn from it? What can I take away from it?
Right.
Even though at the time it was a very negative experience, I don't look at it now as such a negative experience. I mean, it was. I mean, but like, it's not that I have to sit there and look at it and be like, oh man, like. And then the last one is tenacity. The world is built through persistence. You look around, you can name anything you want, right? There are so many things out there that people needed to sit there and push through because it was never going to happen unless they were persistent, unless they
Right.
remained tenacious to the very end. And it's those people that sit there and push the world forward, and the people who sit there and are like, trying to work towards something, they're like, I can't do it, and they give up. Those are the people we never hear about. The people we hear about are the people who are like, no, I have a vision, I see what needs to happen, and I'm going to remain persistent and tenacious until I see that vision through.
For sure. And you use a lot of examples of both, people and real life examples in that chapter, but you also use the metaphor of the water drip hitting the rock foundation, the I guess granite, marble, whatever it was, and over thousands of years, or however you put it, it just drip by drip. There's the slightest pressure, but the consistency is ultimately what put a hole through there. So that was a great metaphor. Just kind of wanted to say that. But then also, in it, like back in Engage, you talked a lot about, and you even said, like I don't want to get too woo woo with the new age, but being mindful of being able to check back in with yourself and kind of realize the here and the now is super important. And then amazing.
Absolutely.
I wanted just to kind of add there that one of the things I liked about that is you said in your journaling process, if you decide to journal, or not even a journal, you can one of the actionable steps that you can do to have a positive attitude towards the different events in your life is write down three things that happened to you that day or that week, and write them in a positive presence, right? Say that
With
this,
a positive light, sure.
yeah, yeah. And it, this happened and it was good because, and, as you begin to write those, you begin to kind of change your mindset, reframing it as you review it, you see things, as in a completely different way. So I thought that was pretty powerful. Those actionable steps there.
Yeah, so that comes sort of somewhat from a study. I'm forgetting the book that I saw it in and the stuff, but it was like a whole study where they found that nuns who had it's like tip of the tongue and it's not popping up, but they found that nuns who had journaled putting a positive spin on the things that had happened in their life lived like decades longer than the nuns who had not. And this was when Martin Seligman in Authentic Happiness, I think. There you go. Boom. These nuns, they it's very hard to control for all factors in somebody's life to find out what really is making a difference on how long somebody lives. But when they're all living in the same place, in the same, and eating the same food and having the same exercise, etc., you can control for it at least a little bit. So they found that the nuns who had the positive mindset were living longer and happier lives than the nuns who weren't. And you had mentioned before the story with the water dripping on the rock. That story is not my own. In the afterword or in the acknowledgments or whatever, I do discuss it. It comes from an ancient story about
I saw that. Yeah.
a rabbi who lived in the end. I think at the end of the Second Temple period. His name was Rabbi Akiva, and he was a shepherd until he was like 40 years old. And he found this girl, and this girl like saw the potential in him. She's like, I'll marry you, but you have to go learn, you have to go study. And so he went and he studied, and when he first initially went, like he couldn't get any of it. Like he couldn't even get the alphabet, nothing. Like, and remember, we're talking about a time when most people are illiterate. So he couldn't, it just, nothing was going into his mind. And he's like, I can't do this. And so he left the school and he started walking home. He gave up. And like on his way home or whatever, he saw this like the water dripping into the rock, and he's like, oh, and that's when he had this realization: if water which is soft can go into rock which is hard, then surely that my brain is soft, like surely I can get this information in. So he went back and cracked the books twice as hard or whatever, and he became one of the greatest scholars of all time. So much so that there's actually a story about, getting into like some more of the esoteric stuff and everything, but a story about Moses, that Moses saw prophetically this man, and he said, well, why aren't you using him to bring the Bible down, to bring it down, and it was just like, God was like, my ways are my ways, like don't start getting into this stuff or anything. But so that's I don't want to take credit for that story or anything. I just borrowed it.
For sure. I mean, either way, it was good. So we only have a couple minutes left. Again, I have so many other things that I could probably ask you, but I'll let you kind of tell everyone where to find you and what you're working on. I'll add real quick, you do have 4 other books, to my knowledge, children's books entitled Someday Soon, Coronavirus Brave, Nobody Cares, and Cheese Monsters. I would have loved to get into the details of those. They sound
We
pretty
can do a
cool.
special episode just for those if you want.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. So I'm definitely looking at those. I've got a little boy also in addition to my 13-year-old. So,
How old is he?
he is 9 and she's 13. So, I've got my hands full with them. But
Cool.
I think both of them could probably benefit definitely both from,
So they're really kids books, but I mean, I can send you some files so you can sit there and share them with them if you want.
Cool. Appreciate that.
They might enjoy the Cheese Monsters one.
Yeah. And then you do so much with hiking and outdoors. You have a company called J-Trex where you do some...
J-Trex, just to be fair, J-Trex is kind of on pause just because I've been trying to I've been working on building a speaking business, and with 2 things open at the same time, it was too difficult to do both. So I kind of put that on pause.
Okay.
I would love to get it back up and running, but we'll see.
Yeah, it was very interesting concept. And then the speaking and coaching is pretty cool. I understand you go to businesses and, I mean, you name it, and do some motivational speeches and personal coaching and stuff like that.
Including prisons. I've been inside a maximum security prison before.
That's pretty cool. I have not.
Yeah. I
Thank
love how I
God.
say that like as a brag, like look me, no.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to like say it like that. No, I mean, but like you know, I worked with the state and their and you know a few of their prisons one time, and one of them was like a maximum security prison, which they like brought me all the way in, and I was like, oh, okay, here we are, you know, and it was pretty cool because the people in there, you know, we really connected, and you know, a bunch of people were talking to me afterwards and stuff, and it was just life is surprising, you know, and that's one of the most amazing things about it. And as long, but we have to kind of like open up our eyes in order to see that a lot of times, and you know, when we're on that autopilot, we miss it.
For
So
sure.
we gotta. That's a big part of what the 5 keys to greatness are all about. Is you know, waking us up, taking us out of autopilot, putting us back into manual mode. You know, like where we're actually experiencing the things that are happening around us, and we're actually experiencing life, because there's so much amazing things. There's so much magic to life, and that's what it's all about.
I love it. Ari, where can people find you?
My website's the main place to find me. Things that I'm working on, ariguns.com, ARIGUNZ.com. And then the book has its own little website with a link to buy it on Amazon, which is littlebookofgreatness.com, all spelled out, littlebookofgreatness.com.
Cool. Ari, thank you so much for coming on the show today and giving us all your wisdom. Guys, go check out the Little Book of Greatness. I highly recommend it. Man, I look forward to talking to you soon. You know, best of luck with everything you got going on.
Yeah, you as well. Jeremy, thank you so much for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
Great interview also. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And yeah, we'll talk soon, man. You have a good one.
Definitely. Thank you.
All right. Take care.
Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed that interview. If you did and you haven't already, hit a thumbs up. Make sure you do that. Subscribe if you haven't already, and hit that notification bell. Also, guys, we have more videos. I want you to check those out by clicking on one of them here or there. And until next time, guys, take care.